Hello and welcome to another lockdown episode of CACHE Alumni's podcast. My name's Dawn and I'm the editor of CACHE Alumni, and this week's guest we have recorded by the magic of technology.
So I met you at the Nursery World show, but our audience don't necessarily know you yet. So could you tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do?
Okay, my name is Heather Maisner and I'm a children's writer. I've written over 38 children's books for children who are very small, from about the age of 2, picture books, to the age of 12. And as well as writing the children's books, I also teach creative writing to children. And I did that all across Hammersmith and Fulham and in Norfolk. And I managed to get HarperCollins publishers to publish a series of the children's books in Hammersmith.
Lovely. So what is it that made you want to be a children's writer? How did you end up as this being what you do for a living?
Well, I've always written. I wrote as a child. I used to hide. I come from quite a big family. I'm one of 3 sisters, and it was a very noisy, lively family. My mother was one of 8 children and my dad one of 4. So we always had so many people coming into the house. I used to hide away and write. And so I had stuff published in the school magazines when I was young. And when I was 16, I won the Daily Mirror Children's Literary Competition out of 35,000 entrants. So I always knew I would be a writer, but I didn't know exactly that I would end up writing for children until I had my own children. And that's when I started writing for kids.
And how different is it writing for kids and adults? What is it about writing for children that you enjoy so much?
I don't know. I think it's the simplicity of it. In fact, writing for children is in some ways harder than writing for adults, because you have to, every word has to count, and you have to narrow down everything you're saying into a simple version, which can be understood and enjoyed by children. So it's quite demanding, but it's such fun seeing the way the children respond, and going into schools and having the kids run up to you and say, look, I've read your book, or I've done this, that and the other. And so it just makes me, I find it easier to write simple things. I'm trying to write, I've written a novel for young adults, but that was the longest, about 30,000 words, whereas usually I'm used to writing for about 300 words sometimes. So this is a big challenge to write more words, a different kind of challenge, as well as being published by all the big publishers in the UK. I recently started publishing my Dinosaur Douglas series of healthy rhyming children's books, which I wrote and published myself. And they're the ones which I now take into schools.
Yeah, and you mentioned reluctant readers earlier on, and that was a specific focus that you had for a little while because of your son's relationship with reading. Obviously, you're also talking about the way that children react to reading your books and the sort of reception that you get when you go into places where children have read your stories. How important are stories for children?
Oh, I think it's very important. It lifts you out of your present situation, and given what the situation is now, I think it's more important than ever to enter the world of different characters. Helps us all. Stories have played an important part in history always. From ancient times when people didn't read, you'd have the storytellers. You've got the Canterbury Tales, where people go on long journeys telling stories. So for children, it's like magic. They're great actually at making up their own stories, many of them. The fantasy world that you can get into just helps you to live your own lives. So I think it's very important. Yeah,
and you mentioned obviously the current extraordinary circumstances that we face at the moment, and how obviously that ability to escape is really important for children. I've actually started reading for pleasure for the first time in a long time, since we ended up indoors a little bit, because there is only so much screen time you can face in a day. Usually I would be a non-fiction reader. I read because I like to find things out. So reading a non-fiction book for the first time in years has been, I would describe that as a magical experience. It's been really nice to immerse myself in a different world and to sort of look at things from somebody else's point of view, just for the fun of it, rather than to try and understand something that is important and big. What would you say to any grown-ups who are listening who might feel pressure to be productive with their reading?
I think by going into these other worlds that writers have created, you can then mirror your own world. When you come back to your world, you can just take it at a different pace, I think, and see that, you know, throughout history and time and in these imaginary worlds, people have dealt with all sorts of problems and found solutions. So whatever seems to be pressing on you now or upsetting you needn't be seen as your own struggle all alone somewhere. It can be shared. And then also, when you've read the book, if you've enjoyed it, whatever it is, you can talk about it to your friends. You can send a text or on the phone. I mean, we're lucky. We have got communication to other people. You could say to your friend, do you know what X or Y did in this story? And then you could even maybe make up stories together and write your own story about some other world than the world you're hearing about daily on the news. And you can get away from the tension maybe that you're feeling from your parents or the people all around you who may be feeling their own anxieties and worries. So a book is a wonderful entry into somewhere else, which is really, really important now.
That's great, thanks. That makes perfect sense, and I like the idea of people being able to get creative and to do things that we might not have done because we live in this world of technology. That we now have the opportunity to be a little bit more creative with how we interact and how we socialise, and the idea of us creating our own world is great. Thank you. You talked about a little bit about the Dinosaur Douglas books there and how you've self-published those, and that they're slightly different to the other books that you've written. What can you tell us a little bit more about what they are and why you thought that they were important?
The Dinosaur Douglas are all health related, and I started writing them because I met by chance or through someone else a paediatric consultant in dentistry who works at the Chelsea and Westminster Hospital. And she said to me, what we really need is a children's book that would help children to clean their teeth. Well, I had never thought about the need to clean your teeth, but she told me some frightening statistics, which were that 1/3 of 5-year-olds and half of 8-year-olds have fillings or missing teeth, and the most common cause of hospital admission in primary school children is dental decay and infection. 26,000 children aged 5 to 9 needed emergency dental surgery in a year. And she was really upset about this and thought that kids need to understand the importance of cleaning their teeth. Well, she got me going, and I thought, well, there must be a way we can get a book to working for those children. Over time, we met lots of times and talked about all of this, and I did loads of research. And gradually I started writing, and as I wrote, the books suddenly became in verse, so they ended up with rhyming texts, and Dinosaur Douglas was born. But I also knew that because I'd worked in publishing, as well as being a children's writer, I have worked in publishing as an editor and a commissioning editor of children and adults books. And I was aware that no publisher was going to want to print, to publish a rhyming children's book about teeth, because I also wanted it to be very inexpensive. the kind of book that people who didn't usually go into bookshops or buy books would want to buy. So I decided the only way to do it was to publish it myself. And we found a brilliant illustrator called Alex Godwin, who had never illustrated a book before. And we just got together and got on with it. It goes all over the country now. Nurses and dentists have all got involved in the book now. It just begins. Dinosaur Douglas filled Mum's trolley with sweets, fizzy drinks, chocolates, a lolly. Mum gave a shout and took everything out. Then once I'd written that and children knew about it, and when I go into schools, kids run up and say, "Look, miss, no bugs in my teeth, no bugs." So they're all very happy and they get to know Dinosaur Douglas as a character. So then I went on, a doctor approached me and said, "There's a need for a book about vitamin D. Rickets was coming back. Children weren't getting enough sunshine."
Yeah, I saw that in the news a while ago about kids being sort of in the house watching things on TV and playing video games instead of being out playing, and the impact that was having on their ability to absorb vitamin D from sunlight and stay well.
Yeah, and that's going to be, unfortunately, what a lot of them are doing now. But, we must encourage them to get out for make sure they get, as the sun's coming out again, it's a good idea to just get out for some time, even if you're indoors too much, because it's not your fault. So then I wrote the book called Dinosaur Douglas Has Fun in the Sun, which is about, you can see it, which is all about the need for sunshine. So on the back it says, Dinosaur Douglas loves the sun, but his frail cousins all look glum. They need your help, and so does he. The clue's outside, what can it be? And then the kids will learn by reading the book where to get their vitamin D, because it's mostly in the sunshine, but also from oily fish and eggs. And, in the winter, you can even have a vitamin D tablet to help make sure your bones grow well and you grow up with strong. So that's how I did the second one, which was all about vitamin D. Following that, someone told me the book, which is very important now, which is the need for children to understand why they should wash their hands to stop the spread of disease. So 2 years ago, I wrote Dinosaur Douglas and the Yucky Mucky Fingers, which encourages them to wash their hands and is in great demand at the moment.
I think there's a lot of grown-ups that I've met over the past couple of years who could do with a children's book on the importance of washing their hands. I think it's very easy to underestimate how many grown-ups tell their children to wash their hands, but are maybe not quite as good at doing that themselves.
That's very true. So maybe this is the one I should read you at the end of this.
Maybe.
Yeah, on the back it says, when Dino D doesn't wash his hands, but simply does as he pleases, the yucky mucky bugs all clap their hands and start to spread diseases. And so that one is all about why you need to wash your hands. And it does help children to realise the importance of it in a big way. And there's a little verse which I now realise you can use for your 20 seconds as you're doing your hands when you're bored with singing happy birthday for 20 seconds.
So it sounds like because obviously things like the book around teeth and vitamin D and healthy eating, does that mean that through the writing of the children's stories that you write, that you've had the opportunity to learn things as well and to sort of exercise that sort of knowledge acquisition that you've then put into those stories, because obviously you're an author, not a dietitian or a dentist so is that a nice opportunity for you to be able to learn things too?
Oh, it's fabulous. I've learned so much doing these books. I really have, and I'm have great admiration for all the consultants who've worked with me, the paediatric consultants, and with the hand washing one, I worked with with a professor at the School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and to see the research they've done, the work they've done, the figures they've found, and you know how they've helped people all over the world with what they do is incredible. And it's, yeah. And what I love doing is simplifying. I mean, I have to take in masses of information and then simplify it down into a story, which I find wonderful. I love doing it. That is kind of a double challenge of not only taking in information, but then translating it, simplifying it, making it rhyme, making it work, getting the pictures right, getting Alex, the illustrator, involved, and then turning it into a book. Oh, it's fantastic. It's given me a whole new way of life and introduced, and also because I'm publishing the books myself, I'm also doing the marketing and the sales and the running around the country, going to exhibitions and events, to like the Childcare Expo and Nursery World Show, to try and let people know that the books exist. And it's been wonderful, that whole, you know, a whole new life in the last 6 years since I've been doing them, while still writing all my other stuff.
Tips, have you got any tips for, at the moment, we've got obviously a lot of parents who have their children at home rather than them being in early years education or primary school, and there's a lot of parents struggling to translate schoolwork or different bits of stuff that their children should be learning, or that they feel like their children should be learning, into stuff that they can do with them at home. Do you have any tips in ways that they can do that, translate bits of learning into something that is simple and nice for children to do?
It's hard for all of us to change our usual behaviour, to be cut off from the people we're usually with. And it can be causing real anxiety that the kids can't express that well. And I think you have to be very careful at this time not to make them feel bad or useless, or, you know, that they're not achieving. They will have time to catch up eventually. I think they just need a lot of love, really. Now, if they're being told not to socialize with their friends, which is so natural that when they're little, if they go for a walk with their parents, sometimes they'll see one of their friends and want to run over and they can't. That's really hard for a child to know why. So when they're back at home, just give them lots of fun. As we all did when we were kids, you're learning all the time. And cooking's a good one, you know, just messing around in the kitchen, helping you do something, even if they're just making a mess beside you, can make them feel useful.
You wanted to bring in maths into something like that, then getting them to weigh ingredients, or, you know, what does that say in terms of the numbers? 400, or, you know, that you can make that into an educational activity when actually it's just fun.
Yeah, I think that's great. That is one of the best ways. Yeah, everything they're doing can have a little bit of maths. You know, even if they're playing with Lego, they can count the pieces. And
so you've mentioned that you're writing young adult fiction at the moment, which is different to the literature that you've written. What's it been like putting yourself into the headspace of a teenager?
Well, actually, the one I'm writing, the young adult book that I've just finished writing, is about a princess at the time of Marco Polo. So much of my writing has always been linked to research. So when I did the game books for my son when he was 7 to 9, it was a lot of information. It was a way of making Where's Wally educational by being one of them was called Around the World Adventure. Another one was an adventure through time, going back in time, where you had to find things and learn history at the same time as you did the game. So while I was doing that book, I came across a princess at the time of Marco Polo in the 13th century, who accompanied him on his return journey from the court of Kublai Khan. And I was fascinated by her. So for years, ever since that, for about 20 years, I've been on and off researching this princess and this journey. I even went to Mongolia to see what it was like to live in a a ger or a yurt, because she was a Mongolian princess. So my story is her story. So it's a mixture of, yes, it's fascinating being young again, going on your travels, but in a way that is so different from the way that that our young people go on their gap years now. That's what fascinated me, that this girl, age 17 in the 13th century, went on an amazing journey with one of the first explorers. And what would it have been like? And how could she cope with it? And that's the story I've written. Yeah.
That's exciting. And actually that reminds me, in terms of we were talking about adults who maybe are a little bit feeling a bit guilty about reading a book for fun. One of my favourite books is a book by the author Victoria Hislop,
Yes.
who writes amazing stories from history. So she started writing because she visited a leper colony in Greece called Spinalonga, which was one of the last ever leper colonies. And her stories tend to be in that real world from the past. So maybe actually it's the same for grown-ups, and we can read stories from these areas of history and submerge ourselves in all of these old worlds, but not feel quite as guilty because we are still learning things about the world and how it used to be. So it's pure escapism. We are also learning by accident, the same as that we sort of encourage children to.
Yeah, I think that's great. And it's good. We do learn. We go back and we can then appreciate what we've got now, but also you can realize what it was like in the past. That's fascinating to see how they did it and what they did.
What about tips for people who are sort of trying to encourage children to write stories? How can we encourage you see you go in and you teach some creative writing for children. What are the sort of common barriers to children being able to create their own worlds?
They're just shy, I suppose. They haven't thought, they haven't let go. Maybe they're nervous that they'll be told what they say is wrong, whereas there's nothing wrong. When you write a story, everything is fine. If you want to get a child going, you can just hide something in a bag or in a box, hide a few things in a box, ask them to take one object out and ask them, what they see, could they describe it? And then say, where might it have been? Even if it's just a stone or a flower or a brooch that might have belonged to someone, any little thing, and just get them. And if you make it a secret box, they'll get really excited, and they won't know what they're going to find. Then when they find it, they'll be so happy that they can start maybe writing about it, and just say, write anything you want. Just don't feel you've got to have a beginning and an end and your spelling's got to be right and everything else has got to be right. Or even just get them to talk and be their scribe. So if a child won't write but will talk about what they can see, and the parent writes it down and reads it back to them, they'll realize it's their story and they can write. So that will help them to realize they can make up stories if they're the kind of child who can't. Now, some kids are wonderful. They can imagine amazing things, but they can't write it down. So again, their imagination is much more advanced than their writing skills. I think most people do have a fantasy world and an imagination, which is there. And
actually, you're right in the way that you write books and the way that children are maybe going to write things about stuff that they know. If you've got older children, it might be that it's actually a case of doing some research into a place or something in history, and rather than writing an essay about the time where we discovered pasteurization and all of that stuff, but actually you might want to write the story of Louis Pasteur and how he discovered those things, and write that from more of a fictionalized point of view, but still using all of that research and those facts to make that a thing. It's talking to you. It's really nice to sort of think of different ways that people of all ages can engage in sort of communicating what it is that they've learned, or proving their knowledge through a much more fun medium than they might have been doing if they were still at school.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, if they can do that, even any age, yes, as you say, any age. Some children will love absorbing facts and writing factual pieces of work. Others, but then, yeah, to turn it into stories would be great if they all started doing it at different ages, because that's what I found so wonderful in my writing, absorbing information and then translating it into many different ways.
It's nice thinking about ways that children's stories can make such a difference to the current circumstances. You know, when people are stuck at home, it's quite a nice way of people connecting together. How about the community that sort of springs up? Obviously, at the moment, you're not going to be doing school visits, but is there something in that collective reading of children's stories? So in primary school settings and nursery settings, reading a book to a group of children and all of those children sort of enjoying that same story in the same way that grown-ups have book clubs often, because it's nice to read things and then talk about them afterwards. Have you experienced much of that sense of community in reading amongst children?
I think that's a great idea you've come up with. I think maybe groups of parents, you know, like you say, the adult book clubs. I'm in a book group and we've been doing it with Zoom, but to do it with a group of children would be a good idea. I know people are doing storytelling times and telling people, you know, switch on at this time and I'll be reading a book. But I think the idea that the children, say 7 and 8 year olds, 9, 10-year-olds could all be reading the same book, that would be really good.
I wasn't sure how well sort of children engage in that sort of way, sort of pre-pandemic. I know that obviously you said that you go in and you go into schools and that you'll often get children who come up and interact with you. I was wondering whether you could speak on sort of whether that is generally the sort of same idea, that they having that story read to them in school gives them that generally that sense of community and have all read something together and being able to talk about it as a group.
Yeah, I think it does create a nice community feeling. And then they often, well, like in World Book Week, which was just before this all happened, I visited 6 schools and I was reading, I was talking about being an author just as we are now, and also reading, because I saw mostly very young children, so I was reading the Dinosaur Douglas books. And afterwards, they all wanted to have a copy and read a copy and talk about it and get it home to their mums. So it does make them feel, especially if an author comes in, I think children get very excited about someone other than their usual teacher bringing something in and bringing something new and showing them how it was done. And then the older children would ask lots of questions about how it is to be an author, and you know, to learn about the world of publishing, and how many people, you know, people are always very surprised at the number of people involved in producing a book, because at first if you say how many people do you think were involved, they'll say, oh, 2, the author and the illustrator. But of course in publishing, there can be up to about 15 people involved in producing a book. It definitely creates a wonderful sense of community to have them all following it up with conversations about what's happened and what they've experienced togeter through reading.
Yeah, I suppose that also leads to conversations about the actual subject matter. So, for example, the Dinosaur Douglas books all have a theme around that sort of health-related bit. So as well as there being that sense of community, just in terms of them all having read the same book and experienced the same experience, they can also then talk about the issues that are raised in that piece of children's literature as well, can't they? Oh,
yeah, yes. And in one school, when I took in the one about teeth, Dinosaur Douglas and the Beastly Bugs, the teachers, they all made dinosaurs and they all pretended it was a dentalist surgery, and they had them and they had made little teeth, and they made a whole week, I think they did a week's work about teeth, which was great. And they did the same with the one about healthy eating, Dinosaur Douglas and the Rumble Grumble Tum. They did the same sort of thing with all the food that he might have eaten and what he should have eaten and he shouldn't have eaten, and then discussed all the healthy food that they should try and eat all the time, and looked at their packed lunches and talked about what was in it and all this. So yes, by having the books as a starting point, lots of discussions take place afterwards.
Excellent. I'm just keeping an eye because we have been talking for a while now, and I was wondering whether it might be a good opportunity to sort of tell people where they can find you if they wanted to find out more, or look at the different books that you've written, or sort of look at different ways of exploring things with their children. Where can people find you?
You can either do www.dinosaurdouglas.com or www.heathermaisner.com. It takes you to the same place. And you can see all the books I've written.
We'll put a link to your website in the show notes, so anyone who's listening to the podcast, if you have a look at the written introduction as to what the podcast is today, you'll see a link to Heather's website in there. If you click on that, it'll take you straight to Heather's website so that you can have a look at all of that stuff. Did you want to end by reading one of your books to anyone listening?
Yes, okay. I'd love to read you Dinosaur Douglas and the Yucky Mucky Fingers.
Thanks, Heather. Stay tuned for Dinosaur Douglas and the Yucky Mucky Fingers after we say our goodbyes.
Thank you so much for your time this morning. It's been really, really lovely talking to you. This would be great if this could be my whole day, but unfortunately I do have more boring things that I also need to do.
Don't forget, if you've got some best practice or you'd like to share with us something great, you can get in touch with us at alumni@cache.org.uk. That's alumni, ALUMNI, at cache, CACHE for echo.org.uk, and would love to speak to you. You can find us at the CACHE Alumni website at www.cachealumni.org.uk, or through the main CACHE website for information about qualifications and other CPD at www.cacheforecho.org.uk. Thanks very much, and until next time, take care. Here's Heather Maisner with Dinosaur Douglas and the Yucky Mucky Fingers.
Dinosaur Douglas rolled in the dirt, grazed his elbow, ripped his shirt, rubbed the scratches, licked his fingers, ran indoors to eat his dinner. Mum called out, "Did you wash your hands?" "Yes," he said, but he hadn't, and the bugs danced over his fingers. Dinosaur Douglas planted seeds, stood in mud up to his knees, caught a beetle, put it back, ran indoors to have a snack. Mum called out, "Did you wash your hands?" "Yes," he said, but he hadn't, and the bugs danced over his fingers. Dinosaur Douglas took off his shoes, ran to the loo, did a big poo, rubbed an eye that irritated, squeezed and picked his nose, then ate it. Mum called out, "Did you wash your hands?" "Yes," he said, but he hadn't, and the bugs danced over his fingers. Dinosaur Douglas had a sleepover with his dinosaur friends, Kate and Rover. They played outside, dug through a ball. The bugs on him began to crawl onto the ball, so when he threw it, they landed on Kate, who never knew it. She threw the ball across to Rover. The bugs were happy, crawling over the dinos' faces and their hands, singing, jumping, ready to land on plates of food and into drinks before the dinos could even blink. Up their noses, into their eyes, little by little they wriggled inside. Through open jaws they slithered fast, skipping, giggling and floating past, wet tongues and down dark throats on bits of food like little boats. The dinos licked their fingers, sucked their thumbs. The bugs swam down into their tums. Through their bodies, see them go, exploring the dinos from head to toe. They had a party multiplied, snug and warm in the dinos' insides. Next day, Doug woke up feeling ill. Rover moaned, "I've caught a chill." "Me too," said Kate, "my tummy aches. Perhaps it's something that we ate." "It is," said Dog, "and not just that. You spread the bugs on all you touched. You passed them on to one another. And because you did not bother to wash your hands or scrub your fingers, you swallowed bugs in your drinks and dinners. Raising eyebrows, looking grim, Doc gave each dino medicine. He told them with a serious frown, the bugs, you know, are all around, on toys and pets and in the air, on handrail, mobile, desk and chair, causing coughs and colds and aches, when washing hands is all it takes to clean those dirty bugs away. Remember, invisible bugs are everywhere, which means you really must take care. Before you eat and after the loo, this is what you have to do. Place soap on hands and rub, rub, rub. Under your fingernails, scrub, scrub, scrub. Then rinse away the soapy suds and dry your hands to kill the bugs.